A charge there from Mr. Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who was in Nigeria yesterday. Well, let's look at the matters arising back here, apart from the politicians that Mr. Boris Johnson was talking about. On Monday, the 6th of February, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, that's the FIRS, and the Lagos Internal Revenue Service, the LIRS, signed a memorandum of understanding to establish a joint FIRS and LIRS audit and investigation team. They call it JITE. And then MOU aims to foster collaboration between the two tax authorities on joint tax audits and investigations to address the issue of duplication of tax on any selected taxpayer, improve exchange of information only for tax assessments, collections, and recovery purposes, and facilitate staff capacity development. Also, the MOU will also assist the FIRS and LIRS to build a reliable and updated database on corporate and high net worth taxpayers. What are the pros and cons of this? How will it affect you? We have Mr. Emmanuel Onasami, lead partner, Cardinal Professional Services, joining us in the studio now. Mr. Onasami, thank you so much for your time and good morning.
And thank you for having me this morning.
So, is there anything special about this? These are government agencies who want to collect our money and call it tax. Is there anything special about this collaboration?
Oh, I would like to mention first, and this is not a first. You know, we've had the government, attempted in the past to have joint tax audit exercise, through the platform of the Joint Tax Board, And that initiative then has its own challenges and some tweeting issues, that really make the entire process very successful. We only hope, that the lessons from the past, must have been learned, and then this time around, Lagos State government and the FIRS will do things differently to get the benefit from this. So it is not necessarily the first, it's just a collaborative effort. And to say, in the provision of the act that established the FIRS, in Section 8, I and J, it gives the FIRS the power to collaborate both locally and then internationally for the purpose of tax administration in Nigeria.
So I think the first thing that will come to a lot of taxpayers, especially those residents in Lagos, will be, will this solve the problem of multiple taxation?
Yeah, and you see, and that is what we've also always put forward to say, the future of taxation is not necessarily looking backward, because when you're talking about tax audit, that means something has been done, and then you want to look at what has been done for the purpose of seeing whether they have been under disclosure or as the case may be. The future of taxation is leveraging technology for digitalization so you can, get more people into the tax net and then foster voluntary compliance, by the people. When people see the dividends of tax, in the economy, it's easy for people to voluntarily comply, and that is where we think the tax authority should be looking but it's where we are. They are still much more interested in looking backward and see how much they can get. One of the biggest objectives of on the table is to increase revenue for taxation, and we want to see how it's play out. We hope to discuss some of the pros and cons as we
yeah, well, that's what we're doing, because you talked about increasing the tax net, because when we look at the 2022 finance bill, it's a source of worry to a lot of businesses, where we see, I think businesses will be taxed about 40% of their profits are going by what we have.
Yeah, so some multiplicity of taxes, increasing proposal to raise education tax,
exactly,
and also introducing some other form of taxes, which then raise the effective tax rate of businesses even beyond what they have been paying prior to now. Yes, there's an argument that the tax to GDP ratio of Nigeria is pretty low when compared to other economies, but the effect, the impact should not be on existing compliant taxpayers. I think the government should be looking at ways to widen the net, bring in people that have not been complying with taxes into the net so that we can increase our tax to GDP. And I think it's actually a leadership issue. We saw the governor of Lagos State being part of that agreement. What are we doing at that level to make sure that all the political class are also contributing to the tax to GDP ratio? Those are questions on the table rather than going to existing compliant people, to ask for additional taxes.
So you do think that this MOU is just for the audits, and so it doesn't really take us forward to where we need to be, which is expanding the tax nets?
Well, according to the letters of the MOU, it's all about joint tax system, but audit is a significant portion of it, and that's why they've expressly mentioned the creation of the Joint Audit and Investigation Team. You understand, the JAIT, but there are some other objective of the MOU, information, exchange of information. You will know that the FIRS in recent time has had a lot of international treaties, getting information about Nigerians that may be taxable in Nigeria. That is potential area of collaboration to widen the tax net if they are able to mine those data effective for the purpose of tax collection. There's also the issue of efficiency when it comes to, reducing the cost of tax collection. There's the government, if they can come together, to do this exercise, may potentially also reduce the cost of collection, among other benefits, capacity development, from the part of the government, looking from the part of the government.
Yeah, I like what you said about the cost of collection. But before we go there, sharing information, the taxpayers, don't they have a say? I mean, can they just wake up FIRS, LIRS and share information of taxpayers? I mean, because even in universal banking, the banks will have to take the permission of the customer before they can share the information. So do we say because we have provided our information, you have it so you can share with the other tax authority?
There's a data protection regulation in Nigeria that is largely compliant with the global GDPR also. And according to the data protection rule, to the extent that there is an express obligation to perform your duty, you have the right. You may have the right to share some data. For example, the FIRS Establishment Act gives the FIRS opportunity to use data and share this data across national agencies, even international agencies, for the purpose of improving the tax administration. But what they also have as an obligation is to ensure the confidentiality of those data and eliminate any possibility of breaches, on those data. And that's why if you see in that MOU, one of the cardinal agreements is that they are going to put in place framework that will ensure that those data are kept with highest level of confidentiality and strict measure to eliminate any possibility of breaches.
So the taxpayer does not really have a say. So they can just tell me, we have the strictest and the highest level of security to protect your data.
It is what it is, as that today the law allows them to use your information for the purpose of tax administration.
Okay, we'll go to court. I think that's the most popular phrase these days. All right, so we also talked about the cost of collection. I've spoken to especially the Lagos State Revenue Service. They've been here a couple of times, and sometimes I ask them, do you have the staff? Do you have the strength, to collect? I mean, there's some parts in Lagos, you wonder if LIRS has ever been there, So when we talk about the issue of cost of collection, how does this collaboration help them?
So it actually boils down to the way they plan to implement this, And prior to now, before the MOU, what would happen is that what must have been happening, or what is happening, is that you see the Lagos state government has its own audit team, go after taxpayers, and maybe a team of 2 people, a team of 3 people, or in some cases they even use consultants, external consultants, to chase some of these taxes, and also FIRS going about their home business. So what I think, if they can effectively come through this collaboration and have some knowledge sharing amongst themselves, maybe FIRS nominates 1 person and 2 person, and LIRS nominates 1 person, you have a complete team and they go. So that reduces that cost, of collection from that perspective. Also looking at the fact that, mobilization, out of station allowance, also reduce if you have those kind of. So those are areas where they can potentially, reduce the cost of collection if this framework is being effectively implemented.
The system still sounds crude to me, because in a technology age as it is now, and with the number of places Nigerians have deposited their data, you would think it's not really necessary.
And I mentioned that earlier, to say the future of tax administration is digital transformation. You need to be able to use the data that you had. I've been here before to discuss data, the importance of data in tax administration going forward. You need a lot of insights from data first before you start going for audit exercise. That will significantly help you reduce the cost of collection if at all you must do a tax exercise. So how well has government put in place technology that will help them mine information about taxpayer to the extent that you only go after the ones that you really need to go after? You could have incurred the cost of collection only to realize that there is nothing to collect. So what do you do about that? So they have been doing some form of risk assessment around that, but not as efficiently as putting in place a robust technology that mines insights from data for the purpose of audit. So that is one of the areas I also believe that their collaboration will look into. Not just make a list. What insight do you have from that list, and how much can you potentially recover, from those pursuits? And
I believe the Corporate Affairs Commission can also provide some information.
You see, that is where the future should be. If you look at developed climate, there's a reason in the UK you have HMRC, tax and customs are together. Because they want to be able to synchronize data for the purpose of informed decision. Government agencies need to look for avenue to marry data for the purpose of governance. You understand? You cannot, I see myself dropping data everywhere, and I'm thinking, what have we done with this data? CAC has a repository of all businesses in Nigeria filing annual returns every year. So how have you been able to sync that data into what FIRS is doing, and possibly what the Joint Tax Board is also doing, in a manner that will help us to increase the tax net? We have a lot of data that FIRS have also collected by all those international treaty, common reporting standard, automatic exchange of information. What have we done with those data? Rather than going back to the usual customers that are already compliant, there's a way that you can reduce your feasibility with the taxpayer and still increase your tax net by deploying technology.
Help me to understand, what do you think is the hurdle among government agencies and ministries that has stopped this synchronization of data? You go to the passport office, you go to the FRSC for driver's license, you do your NIN, you do your BVN, I mean, where you work, you also have your, what's the hurdle? Is it competition amongst them?
So I think a number of issues, multiplicity of issues, but I think top amongst them is the issue of goal congruence. We don't really have goal congruence amongst our agencies. So everybody is pursuing their targets. You understand? FIRS has its own target, Customs has its own target. It's the taxpayer that suffers. So I want to get as much as possible custom revenue from the same taxpayer, and then the FIRS also wants to get as much as possible taxes from the same taxpayer, and you then see the taxpayer suffering some level of multiple taxation because of lack of goal congruence. That goal congruence, defining where we are going as a country and where all our agencies know their role in that singular goal, you understand, plays a key part in solving this problem. And also, you also know there may be some political interest issue. There are people that are for FIRS and some people that, you understand. So some political undertone may also be determining the behavior of all these agencies.
A different focus, but in the same economy. So eventually, we talk about the tax collection for 2023, the economic growth, the real sector. It all fits into the same economy at the end of the day.
So you want to evaluate your growth and say, okay, is this growth at the expense of the taxpayer, you understand, or whether you have been able to increase the wide net such that the compliant ones are not feeling overburdened, because there is also a cost to a business feeling overburdened by tax compliance issue and multiple compliance issue that may eventually make a decision to exit, and that is where we don't want our businesses to get to in this dire situation that we are in this economy. So we need to look at our policy holistically and find some form of goal congruence. There must not be duplication of taxes, by tax agencies and collection agencies across the nation.
And in the midst of this, taxpayers are still complaining of compromise in the system.
Yeah.
And sometimes the taxpayers play along because they feel they can pay less when they comply and cut corners?
Well, it's a sensitive matter to discuss on air, but I think the FIRS, give the kudos to them, a number of whistleblowing policies that they have put in place to ensure that their people are doing what is right, when it comes to tax collection and ensuring that all the revenue that is due to the government comes into the purse of government. Not to say that there may still be some few bad elements, trying to see how, but if you want to look at it from the perspective of the taxpayer also, you look at yourself as a taxpayer and evaluate, is there, if not for the law, is there really a moral ground for me to comply with taxes? Because the only reason I'm complying is because it's a law. You look around, you have to almost fix everything for yourself. And why not just use that money to fix everything for yourself, and whatever is left is what I pay for taxes? There's a moral question around making tax impactful for businesses in the economy. If you get that sorted, then voluntary compliance will increase. And all this issue of underground conversation will also reduce ordinarily. But because there is a mismatch between paying taxes and seeing the impact of taxes, it then makes those conversational efforts less productive.
And all of this fits into another responsibility or expectation from the incoming administration, because a lot of Nigerians are hopeful that, since we have a new man on board from May the 29th, he should come with new vision, brighter vision that would deal with some of these things. Yeah,
so I believe whoever will definitely be inaugurated. I don't want to speak to that.
Well, we have a president-elect for today, so we can simply say Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the president-elect.
By the president-elect, when the president-elect will be inaugurated, I believe that from his experience with Lagos State, and I think he was one of the president-elect was one of the transformative regime, when it comes to increasing IGR in Lagos State, during his era. And I believe he learned some things from there. I think some of those ideas have also been imported into the operations of the FIRS at the Central. I think he can consolidate from those experience and bring about changes that will further progress the tax regime in Nigeria.
But Nigerians will hope that will not mean more taxes to be paid.
Well, I also pray that it won't mean more taxes because
we already have it high when we look at the 2022 finance bill.
Yeah, so you may want to argue that our tax to GDP ratios is low, but if you evaluate compliant taxpayers in Nigeria, there are multiplicity of taxes, which then make the burden for the compliant ones to be high. You understand? But if you want to look at it and say, how can we improve our tax to GDP ratio? I think the way to go is to see how we can get more people into the tax net. There's this argument to say informal sectors are not taxed, but they are taxed. Whether formally
they are informally taxed.
They are informally taxed. So how do we get those informally taxed revenue back into the purse of the government to add to our tax to GDP ratio? Because as of today, we can't account for those collections from the informal sector. So how can we get those money back into the government force and see how that will improve our tax to GDP ratio so that we can rightly evaluate the informal sector? You understand, whether they are paying taxes or not. That is one issue on the table. And another issue on the table is to also look at, the issue of during this election period, I did not hear conversation about our political people about their tax affairs. It should be a front burner issue. Do you understand? You cannot lead from the back. You have to be seen to be doing what you want your people to do. The president-elect, on day one, show your tax clearance certificate. Make a strong message that this is the era for tax compliance. Every political person should also do the same within their respective jurisdiction. And you then begin to see people say, okay, if the leaders, the people that are asking us to do the same, are doing the same, then why shouldn't we do? But if I sit down wherever I am, I say, even the people that are asking me to do something is just like you training your child. Don't watch TV, but you are on the screen. And your child wonder, why can't I also see the screen? So do what you want your kids to do. If you want them to read, read.
Practice what
If you want people to pay tax,
pay tax. And show it.
Show it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Onasami, lead partner, Cardinal Professional Services.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will be following that collaboration between FIRS and LRS and see if their own conflict.
Yeah, they promised to issue the guidelines around it and the regulation. We hope to see the framework. And with the consultants, it's our bread and butter. We have to analyze it and see how we can help our clients.
All right, yeah, thank you so much for your time this morning. All right, let's take a short break now. When we come back, it will be Commodities Time. You're in Business Morning on Channels Television.